very fitting that we opened with that nice little meditation to kind of get everybody present and centered, because that's the basis of what I wanted to talk about today, is how cultivating presence and having a present state of mind can really help to cope with the realities and the struggles of um, the challenges that DMD faces. But first, I just wanted to like articulate my experience with Duchenne and what my family is like, to give you context and an understanding of where I'm coming from and my relationship with this disease. So, yeah, my brother and I have grown up with this disease together. And in my 21 years of life, I've seen the progression of Duchenne quite clearly, and its physical, emotional, and mental impacts both on Charlie, my brother, and those around him, his loved ones, and my family members. Um, After my brother had been diagnosed, my parents pretty much immediately founded a nonprofit called Charlie's Fund, which raises funds and awareness for a treatment and eventually, hopefully, a cure for. So ever since really I have been old enough to remember, I mean, my first memories are around the same time, 4 years old, when Charlie was first diagnosed. Duchenne has been an integral fact of my life, of my brother's life, of my family's life. And my parents' foundation and their commitments to that have also been a pretty significant aspect of my life. As a child and as a toddler, when before the realities of Duchenne have really been kicked into full gear, my brother and I had a relationship as most brothers do. We would play basketball together. We would we were on the same basketball team at one point. Even we would go for hikes together. We would water ski, do activities that physically he was capable of doing. And then, as you all know, and as time progressed and as we matured, so too do the realities of Duchenne. And those activities that we used to share together slowly became less frequent and eventually not at all. And really, in high school was the threshold where the difficulties and challenges that Duchenne presented became into full light and started to really kind of kick into full force, where in the past it had been, oh, my brother takes a lot of pills during the day and maybe has to take breaks during recess a little more frequently than others. In high school, it became, okay, now Charlie can no longer walk, or now Charlie needs help grabbing a jug of milk from the fridge, where really he had to become more reliant on us as family members and as friends to understand what is required for him to do very basic tasks that most people don't even consider as anything that would require outside assistance, just from physically being limited. And it's then when the physical limitations started to really manifest that I started to truly think about what Duchenne means and its impact emotionally and mentally on myself, my brother, and those around me. And it was fitting that that timing happened to be so when I had been in high school too, on the latter end, and I had started to enter adulthood and be a young adult and start to really consider kind of at the risk of sounding ridiculous and pretentious, the more like philosophical ramifications of Duchenne and what it means to live with someone with a chronic and terminal illness, and how to kind of digest that and to live a life that is happy, that is fulfilled, but also acknowledges just how difficult and um, how sad those certain challenges present. Um, and around that same time, when my brother truly started to kind of deal with Duchenne in a way that he hadn't before, where he really had to kind of reevaluate the ways in which he could live his life independently and also while relying on other people, that a pretty significant event happened. It was about 4 years ago, I would say, that my brother and I were just kind of messing around, playing as brothers do. And I had by accidentally broken my brother's hip, which for anybody is a particularly bad injury, but for someone with Duchenne muscular dystrophy is devastating. And this was before he had been stricken to a wheelchair 24/7. He was walking, but with challenges. And when this event happened and I caused this injury, he was put in a wheelchair. And I remember that night horribly, honestly. It was, and then during a family celebration, even I think it was a Hanukkah celebration, where my brother had to immediately get rushed to the hospital. My parents went with him. The festivities of the evening were put on pause, and I was left really by myself and in my room to kind of fear the worst. Quite possibly, what did I initiate? Did I possibly make it so that my brother could never walk again? Did I possibly expedite the greatest fears that I had, that my brother had, that my parents had, and make them more real? Something that you kind of push aside and think that will not happen very much happened. And the next morning when my brother came home in a wheelchair, it was quite possibly the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life, is come out of my room, look my brother in the eyes, and tell him with my tail between my legs that I am sorry. It was an accident, an incident that happens, but at the same time, you feel that can be prevented if you were more cautious or just more aware of the fragility of his body, considering the disease he has. And I had been expecting anger, resentment, I don't know, any of that from him, because I made it so that his worst fears, that he'd be in a wheelchair, that he would have to be reliant on other people for the remainder of his life, a reality. And surprisingly so, he was the total opposite. He showed no signs of any such emotions. Instead, he was understanding, he was considerate, he was empathetic of my remorse, and he acknowledged this bump in the road as just that, as just another bump in the road, as severe as it may have seemed. He didn't necessarily approach this obstacle as any greater than the obstacles he has dealt with for all his life, and any of the obstacles that he's been presented by countless doctors, by my parents, by his disease. And soon after, he was more or less okay. I mean, he had been in a wheelchair for about 6 months or so, got surgery, pretty intense surgery, and for a little bit was walking once again, until eventually just the nature of DMD put him in a wheelchair, just by virtue of the inexorable fact of his disease. But what I want to talk about with you guys, and what I'm curious to hear about, are ways in which that your loved one, whether it be your son or I don't know, a grandson, whatever your connection is with a child with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. uh, I'm curious to hear if there are times or if there are circumstances in which your loved one has demonstrated a stance or an emotional state, or um, even just articulated a thought that really surprised you. Because I was so surprised by my brother's ability to look at what I had done to him and understand that this is life, that this stuff happens, and that this just happens to be his life, as difficult as it is. But there's no point in being angry, being depressed about it. There's only one thing to do, and that's to just keep on chugging. And that really surprised me. And I'm curious if you guys have had similar experiences with your loved one having a surprising reaction to what is normally and otherwise a very, very depressing disease. And have they shown signs of hope, signs of encouragement, of optimism that you would have otherwise not have seen from them or not have expected from them?